Oh, so I would like to welcome the viewers to what I anticipate is going to be a very fruitful and powerful discussion discussing the relationship between police and the Black community as a whole, and how we can solve or at least mitigate or minimize a lot of these bad outcomes that seem to keep happening. Of course, the catalyst for our discussion tonight is Nate Parker's powerful film, American Skin. My name is Greg Forde. I am the host and creator of the podcast, The Platform Talk, and it's my great privilege to be here with this esteemed panel as we attempt to kind of dig into the weeds and see what we can do about a problem that doesn't seem to want to go away. All right, so I'd like to introduce our panel, starting first with the woman who brought all this together, Jackie Carter. Jackie is responsible for putting this together, and she is the president of the Alliance for Safe Traffic Stops. Jackie is also the inventor of the Not Reaching pouch, inspired by the tragic events of July 6, 2016, when Valerie Castile had his life taken unnecessarily by a now former police officer. ASTS, or Alliance for Safe Traffic Stops, has also launched some very bold initiatives, one of which is called the KISS campaign, which is the acronym for Keeping It Safe for Students. Jackie will elaborate on that a little further on in the discussion, okay? Jackie is also a frequent collaborator and co-conspirator with Valerie Castile and has done work with the Minnesota Department of Public Safety and also the Fairfax City Police Department. Also joining us is Jackie's husband, Wayne. Wayne, in addition to serving on the board of ASTS, is the Director of Training and Education with an emphasis on teen motorists and proper de-escalation techniques. Next, we have the aforementioned Valerie Castile, who is the president and CEO of the Philando Castile Relief Foundation, named, of course, in honor of her son, Philando. The foundation's primary purpose is to provide immediate assistance to those grieving from the loss of a loved one due to gun violence, as well as providing immediate short-term assistance in the form of food, funeral clothing, and other tangible resources. And finally, the foundation allows Philando's personal legacy of kindness to live on through dealing with school lunch debt. One of the things that Philando was known for was to pick up the tabs of students who couldn't afford to pay for their lunch. So this is now an integral part of what the Relief Foundation does. And to date, they have accounted for more than $200,000 of school lunch debt. Next, we have Sean Logicono. Sean is a native of Washington, D.C. and a University of Maryland grad who served on the Metropolitan Police Department between the years 2014 and 2019. Welcome, Sean.
Thanks.
Next, we have Captain Ronnie Lewis, who serves as the commander of the Patrol Operations Division and Civil Disturbance Unit in the city of Fairfax in Northern Virginia. One of the things that Captain Lewis is involved in is he leads the department's newly created Public Outreach Liaisons Invested in Community Engagement team. The acronym, of course, is POLICE. Which focuses on forging lasting connections between the community and the police department. Next, we have Onyx Hicks, who is a social justice activist, author, speaker, business executive, and community leader. Ms. Hicks also is an advocate for prison reform and is actively promoting legislative and judicial remedies to combat the marginalization and implicit bias against people of color. Onyx was also very instrumental in removing a Confederate statue in her hometown, Portsmouth, Virginia. Welcome, Onyx. Next up, we have Reverend Dr. Taft Quincy Heatley III. There's no the third, but it sounds like there should be a the third after that. So we'll call him Q for the remainder of the panel discussion per his request. But Dr. Heatley is the senior pastor of Shiloh Baptist Church. Shiloh is a historic church in the Old Town community of Alexandria, Virginia, and was founded in 1863 by formerly enslaved Africans. Reverend Dr. Heatley is also a published author whose first book, God is the Goal, The Chase for Intimacy with God, was published in 2014. And he also has a background in investment banking and financial analysis and is a recent graduate of the Candler School of Theology and Emory University, where his ministerial doctorate is in biblical interpretation and proclamation. So congratulations, Reverend Doctor. Next, we have Stephanie Morales, who is the first woman, period, to be elected Commonwealth's Attorney in Portsmouth, Virginia. Ms. Morales, pardon me, is, the first thing that she was able to do was to create or institute the initiative called the Control-Alt-Delete program, which taught effective reentry strategies and helped reduce recidivism of formerly incarcerated citizens. She has also pioneered her Future Leaders Initiative, which affords students from elementary school all the way through law school an opportunity to shadow, intern, or fellow in the Commonwealth's Attorney's Office, and upon completion, earn the title Junior Commonwealth's Attorney. Finally, Ms. Morales' team has formed the Social Media by the Statutes program, where public school students learn how their behaviors online and through technology can affect them legally and permanently. Next, we have Brian Favors, who is the co-founder and program director of the Nate Parker Foundation, which merges film, storytelling, and culturally responsive programming to aid young African Americans in navigating and overcoming the variety of crises plaguing the at-large community. He has also co-founded Breaking the Cycle Consulting Services and the nonprofit Sankofa Community Empowerment, Inc. Finally, Mr. Favors is a contributing author to two books, Internalized Oppression, The Psychology of Marginalized Groups, and The Birth of a Nation, Making of a Movement. And lastly, but certainly the opposite of least, the reason and the catalyst for this discussion, we have Nate Parker. Nate is a veteran Hollywood actor, writer, and director with leading roles including Red Tails, Beyond the Lights, The Great Debaters, and one of my personal favorites, Birth of a Nation. Nate's current film for which we've gathered this evening is American Skin. Welcome, Nate. Welcome to all of you. So obviously much of this discussion will have Nate and his film at the center, but I want to make sure that we keep all of you active. We've got a panel of almost 10 people here. So there's going to be some situations where some of you may not be speaking and some of you will, but I'll do my best to make sure that everybody stays involved and everybody has an opportunity to contribute. So I want to start with, if we could just very quickly, I know that everybody's here. I want to give everybody a chance and the viewers a chance to sort of get a taste of what they're in store for with each of you. If we could just get maybe all of you to describe the movie in maybe 1 or 2 words, the way it hits you as soon as the credits started to roll. Dr. Heatley, we can start with you.
Riveting.
Okay. Ms. Morales?
Familiar.
Familiar. Captain Lewis?
Hard to watch.
Hard to watch. Okay. Jackie?
Profound.
Okay. Wayne?
Interesting.
Okay. Onyx?
Facts.
All right. Brian?
Reality.
Reality. Okay. Sean?
Conversation starting.
Okay. Valerie?
Reflection.
Okay. All right. Nate, what was the first word that came to you as soon as you knew that you had the final edit done and you watched the movie completed for the first time? What word or words struck you?
Necessary.
Necessary. Okay. I like that one. All right. What I want to start with is the situation that Nate's movie deals with is something we're all familiar with. Okay. Nate, I've watched a number of interviews with you, seen you on Hot 97 with the Breakfast Club. Can you just give I know you've said this already, but just for the sake of this audience, could you give us a quick rundown of the inspiration for the reason for the film?
Absolutely, but I'd be remiss if I didn't recognize the matriarch on this call, Ms. Valerie Castile. I want to thank you for your strength, your commitment and determination to pushing for justice, not only for your son, but for all of our babies, our uncles, our aunts, our sisters, our brothers, our nieces and nephews. The pain that you had to endure was definitely an inspiration when I was putting together this film. And I'll get into that in a moment, but I wanted to just let you know that if you're proud or if you saw value in this film, then I've done my job. You know, I respect everyone on this call, but if you see something, if you saw anything in this film that spoke to your pain, your grief, your hope for justice, the conversation that I'm hoping, that I've seen spill out into the streets, just know that I've written it for specifically your son and so many of us that recognize him in your law. So I appreciate you, mother, sister, queen. It means everything to be on this call with you. And one of the main reasons why I so quickly agreed to be on the call. So thank you. I acknowledge you. Speaking about the inspiration for this film, I have 5 daughters. I'm from Norfolk, Virginia, so Portsmouth. Miss Stephanie Morales is saying that put a smile on my face. And I grew up very hard, Tidewater Park, Norfolk, Virginia, and then ended up at Churchland High School in Portsmouth. That was a school system where my nephew was in at middle school. And here in California, when I heard that he needed support, my sister asked if I could help raise him as his father was away in prison. And so I talked to my wife. She said, okay. And I sat my nephew down. I said, listen, young man, I'm going to give you an opportunity not to escape from the people that look like you, but to put you in a position where you'll have the tools to have the life that you want and go back and make sure they can have opportunities that they want. And I brought him with me here in California. And if you can imagine, I was very excited because I felt that, you know, I'm the first to go to college, and I knew for sure he would be the second person in a position to be able to do it. But I realized very quickly, August 2014, when I was sitting next to him, he'd been living with me for a year, and we were watching the TV screen, and we're looking at Michael Brown, his body face down, floating in the sun. And he said, Uncle Nate, what do I do if I get pulled over on my bike, riding my bike to school? Now, mind you, he is a darker skinned brother, tall for his age, as nice and kind as it could be, but he's now riding his bike, not through Portsmouth to Churchland Middle School, but to through an affluent white community to an affluent white school. So the question was charged. And I realized very quickly, for all of my films and social justice, my great debaters, or all these things that people seem to praise, in that moment, my heart dropped, because I knew at that moment what I was going to have to do. And so, you know, I told him, you know, if you see a cop following you and you feel like his intention is to pull you over, the first thing you do, if you can, call me, because I'll likely be close. And then I said, well, don't reach for your phone. Don't call me. Just slow down, not fast. Don't smash it. Just slow down, put your feet on the ground, put your hands up, and as quickly as you can, make eye contact so he can see your face, that you're a baby face, that this 6-foot silhouette is not some man that can be confused with anyone. You can see your humanity, show him your hands, and make sure that every subsequent step has to do with you doing whatever he tells you to do. And I'm looking at him and he's looking at me, and his eyes are like this. And I realized very quickly I was traumatizing him. That this, you know, me as his uncle, who he looked at as a hero, was sweating as he tried to give him instruction on how to, you know, save his life in case he came across the wrong person, the wrong circumstance. And I realized very quickly I was ashamed because I didn't have an answer. There was no amount of rhetoric that could let him know that he was safe. I had to let him know that he was not safe, and let him know that for the rest of his life, he would be in a situation, whether I was there or I wasn't there, he would have to adhere to a different set of rules given the different circumstances. And so that's when I said, okay, I'm an artist. I'm going to figure out a way to tell a story or to write a piece that I think can speak to him. So it started out as a letter to him that was supposed to travel over time. And that think piece turned into a short story, turned into a script. And then I was able to raise the money and shoot the film based on tons of research, you know, whether it been from mothers who had endured this terrible grief of having lost a child or a loved one, as well as law enforcement. Some people that I knew before, some that I met through friends that would speak to me under the condition of anonymity. So that is how this script and movie came to be. And I remember when I made it, I'd call Brian a lot. So Brian is my mentor, in addition to my co-founder. And I'm sure we could speak more about how that came to be. But we used to go into alternative schools and really just, you know, we wanted to take the Henry Love. We wanted to take the person that was the rejected young person and make a cornerstone out of them with our support. And so stepping into this place of making films that really held us accountable was something that I really, you know, set my feet in. So this movie, it really came from lots of conversations, lots of questions, lots of interviews, lots of research. And I designed it to really spill into the streets. So there was no ending of the movie. So when the credits rolled, the feeling stayed. The lead in your shoes, in your seat, made it so you couldn't move. And the first thing you would do is hopefully tell someone or talk to someone or call someone and allow whatever was set up in this film, whatever questions that it inspired to be the next several weeks of your conversation.
Okay, all right, thank you, Nate. I'd like to do, what I would like to do is to start moving through the movie sort of piece by piece and then speaking to each of you panelists as it becomes relevant as we move through certain sections. But before I do that, I want to just take one more detour. Nate, I watched your interview and I listened to the one you did with the Breakfast Club.
Okay.
I think one of the things you said to Charlemagne and DJ Envy was, we're still fighting for our 2/5. And then in listening to what you just said about the inspiration and how you felt when you were trying to communicate or articulate to your nephew, who you've adopted, what he should do in the way that you felt. And I jotted down a note here, and it says, DJ Envy said to you that his dad was a cop, and his father used to tell him, swallow your pride and make it home. We'll find a way to win later. Now, obviously, that really stuck with me. Obviously, getting home alive is a win. But I wanted to find out from Onyx, Valerie, and Brian. Brian, you dealing with the book that you wrote, Onyx being an activist, Valerie being an activist, getting home safe, but knowing that your value as a human being has been taken away from you. Oftentimes, if you're a Black male, you're emasculated. How do we survive and how do we navigate that type of mental aggression when it comes to, yeah, I have to make a decision between my value as a human being and the ability to stay alive? How do we navigate that? Onyx, you can go first.
I would say the more you know, the harder it is to navigate. And I speak from the experience of not only being an activist, but being a mother to Black sons. That is something that often made me, and sometimes even still makes me, feel like I am not being authentic, because you want to live to fight another day. One of the things that resonated with me in the movie was the conversation that he had with his son, because that's the conversation I had with my sons. I moved them from one of the most dangerous neighborhoods in Portsmouth, Virginia, to Isle of Wight. But when my sons became of age, I had to dial back all of the things I had taught them from an activism perspective, from the things of them learning about laws and how to protect themselves and what their rights were. I felt like as a mother, I was teaching my sons how to devalue themselves. I felt like I was teaching them how to be less than the very thing that I fight for. I fight for our rights. I fight for us to have equality. I fight for equity. But at the end of the day, I want my son to live. And that is a huge imbalance that we seem to continue to be against and always on the uphill climb. And the only way around it, truthfully, is legislation. We say legislation and it helps, but it is shaped and steeped in so much colonialism and so much hatred for over 400 years that it's the truth. There has to be real conversations so that people can so we can see where people are. All of this political correctness and hiding behind these things so that we seem like we're getting along when we're really not is so dangerous, because when you have these implicit biases, it's dangerous. When you have the power of life and death in your hand, it's dangerous. The only way around it is real conversation and to change the way that America views Black people. And we have over 400 years of work to do.
Okay, thank you, Onyx. Valerie, when we talk about what Envy said about his father and making it home and getting a win, we know what you've had to go through with the loss of Philando. So that's a whole nother way to look at this dynamic. So your son didn't come home, but you have now, in his honor, created a relief foundation, which has benefited thousands of people. In some ways, that's a win, but at the same time, it comes out of tragedy. How do you continue to navigate and be strong, knowing that, yes, you're watering the lives of other people, but what was the cost of the seed of that?
Well, as a mother, you know, it's very, very personal, it's hurtful, and it's something that you'll never get over. You'll grieve for the rest of your life because, you know, a part of you have been taken, because our children are replicas of ourselves. And when my son was denied his right to live, I felt like I was denied my right to live as well. But instead of being beaten down, I chose to rise above. And by doing that, I wanted to keep my son as close to me as I possibly could by doing the things that he held near and dear to his heart. We have not evolved as a civilized people. We have devolved. And I think people have heard me say that before. And I say that because throughout the 400 years, our people have fought, we have struggled, we have prayed, we have protested, we've talked, we've done all these things. And here we were in 2016, and when that guy was acquitted of murdering my son, I felt like we hadn't accomplished anything. It was all hidden. And we had gone back to the 60s. You know, when the civil rights movement very first started, I felt like that's where I had been placed at that particular time. And I've given my son the talk. That's what I call it, the talk. But I also taught him about characteristics, being honest, being a nice person, don't lie. You know, I had a conversation with a guy at the Police Federation. I said, you come into the community, you say, if you see something, say something. I know y'all see stuff every day in a locker room, but do you say anything about your coworker? No, you don't. But then you want us to not lie, and then you be honest, they shoot you. You lie, they shoot you. So it's like a double-edged sword. What do you want from us? Right. What do we have to do in order to be treated equal? Right. You say legislative. The wheels are so slow and the red tape is unbelievable.
Thank you.
So now, yeah, we still got to fight it that way. You know what I'm saying? But at the end of the day, with all the frustration and, you know, the rioting and the looting and all that, so that should tell legislators that there's a problem amiss. Okay. People of all walks of colors and nationalities and cultures have come out to display their distaste and their distrust. So yeah, we got a lot of work to do, but we can only do what we can do. And that's to keep moving forward.
Thank you, Valerie. Brian, your book that you wrote,
yes,
co-authored, Internalized Depression.
Yes.
Listening to what Valerie just said and what Onyx articulated, I'm sure this is the kind of thing that you actually are talking about in the book.
Absolutely,
absolutely. What do you have to say? What do you have to say?
This is multi-generational trauma. You know, my grandparents grew up in the segregated South where they were taught they weren't allowed to look white folks in the eyes. These are the people who raised me. So this isn't, you know, 100 years ago. And one thing Brian Stevenson says often, and we've had a chance to do a lot of work with Brian Stevenson, but he said slavery never ended, it just evolved. And, you know, one of the scholars that we utilize a lot, Nate and I, in our work is Dr. Joy DeGree, post-traumatic slave syndrome. And she talks a lot about how, you know, we used to have to teach our daughters how to lay when they're assaulted. We used to have to teach our sons to dumb themselves down so they didn't get sold. These were always survival mechanisms that we've had to do. And I think that scene that we saw with Nate, speaking to his son, you know, the talk, as we say, that is a reminder of what Nate said. We're still dealing with that legacy of 3/5, and it's in every aspect of our life. And one thing that we talk about solutions, that's a really complex conversation. But healing from racial trauma requires individuals. first of all, to understand the root of the problem. You know, it's Black History Month. Marcus Garvey told us that people without knowledge of their history are like trees with no roots. So you have to understand the legacy and the history of policing Blacks in this country. It's brutal. It's slave patrols. It's the same thing that we're dealing with now. The same conversation I have to have with my 13-year-old son is the root of the problem is the same, and we haven't confronted that. So anything that we do in regards to legislation and all these different things without dealing with that root, I think, Nate, you said it in one of the interviews, it's like putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. I was a high school teacher. I worked with youth in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. Our kids are so used to being violated. The cops roll up and they don't even, you know, they'll go up to the wall. They don't even realize that they have rights, right? And it's traumatic. But what we have to do, because there is no way to eliminate the trauma because we're in it, but we have to let our people know, especially our young people, you're part of a protracted struggle, right? And as bad as things are, we got to give them vehicles for social justice. We got to give them a village that supports them. And we got to arm them with the legacy of our ancestors who endured this before and did more with less, right? Because when you know what you've done, you know what you can do. We don't have the luxury. You know, my grandparents didn't talk to me about this stuff. I went to integrated schools. I was the Black kid bused to the white school to play ball. They saw I had white friends, and on the surface, how things went well. But because of their trauma, they didn't want to talk to me about it, even though I was still dealing with it. And I think one thing we have to do is eliminate the idea of the talk. It is no talk. It's an ongoing conversation and education. My Jewish friends have been going to Hebrew schools since they were little, and they're not getting a talk. They're going an ongoing education about collective economics, about how to create their own police forces and how to sustain themselves. So, you know, we don't have an answer. You know, marginalized groups are all dealing with this, but we know we need each other, and our solutions are going to have to come from us. They're going to have to come from us.
Thank you, Brian. Valerie, Onyx, and Brian have all mentioned the talk. I want to shift this question to Nate and then Jackie and Wayne. Wayne, I won't steal your thunder. There's a phrase that you like to use, and the scene where Nate is having the conversation with his son in front of his friend. There's a phrase that you use specifically in your training. I'd like you to share that with the panel and then elaborate on what that means. And then Jackie, you can also chime in after Wayne. And then after that, Nate, I'd like you to describe the process, how many drafts it took for you to feel like that particular scene was right and it was the proper expression of what you were trying to get across in that scene. So Wayne, Jackie, you first, then Wayne, then Nate.
Well, you know, it's the scene that you're referring to was one that when Wayne and I saw it, we immediately looked at each other because the young man believed he has rights, right? We all believe we have those rights, but really, they don't really belong to us. And that's my personal opinion. You know, everybody might have their own. I don't believe that we have come to a place in our lives where those rights really, really belong to us. And I believe that sometimes when we're taken out of our own bubble, where we learn that, you know what, yeah, this is the First Amendment, Second Amendment, blah, blah, blah. But we know, because we're in the hood, that, yeah, okay, I heard it, but it really don't belong to me. And we take people out of that bubble and they give them a false sense of security. And that's what I saw happen in the movie. But I do want to say briefly, when I talk with Valerie, one of the things that still brings me to tears is when she says to me, I taught my son to do all the right things. And keep in mind that from the moment Officer Yanez reached Philando's vehicle to the time that he lost his life was only 74 seconds. 74 seconds. And you heard Philando. He was polite. Yes, sir. You know, he volunteered his information. And just like she has said to me, when was the last time, and I'll bring this to the panel and it'll take you like more than 2 seconds to think, but when was the last time you heard of a motorist shooting an officer while he's in a seatbelt in his vehicle? Go ahead, Wayne.
Okay, one of my phrases I use a lot of times is with training is you can't hold court on the side of the road. And that's what I really want, young men to like understand is like, all fights are not good fights at a time. But I see that we're all in the same place with this movie, with the teaching, because that was my part of the movie. Because when you have intelligent kids that are being educated and are learning certain things, and they learn the law, like the young man in the movie, well, Dad, I can do this, and we're like, no, you can't, so now we have to teach against that, so how do we do that? Because just like you heard Valerie, I taught my son the right things, so now we got our like, no, that is the law, but you don't use the law. You know what I mean? This is what we're up against. You know what I mean? So when you see intelligent young men that get stopped and they know the law and they know they're right, they can't use it. We see what happens, when they try. You know what I mean? And this is every day. This is an everyday teaching. This is something we're gonna have to do on a daily, and it just is what it is. You know what I mean? But I truly, this is, what both me and my wife will continue to do. And this is why we try to do what we do, is because we want to teach people. We don't want, it's not always officers. I've seen some traffic stops handled terribly by motorists. You know what I mean? So I think we all need to be trained and taught, in certain ways. I could teach my son, but they're not teaching their son over here, and they're not teaching their son over here. So we're still behind the 8 ball. You know what I mean? So we're, how do we teach against that? And that's where I'm baffled at times, because I'm like, we're up against something, that we're trying to teach. How do we do that? I don't have all the answers. I can teach you certain things to do during the traffic stop and what you should do and all that. But we see when you do that, that doesn't even work. We lost Philando. So this is what we're up against, and we can beat our heads up against the wall, and we could talk about this all day long, but how do you truly teach that? And I think that part of the movie really said to me, because I have 2 sons, and it's so when I think back, I actually never really had to teach my sons about a traffic stop, just to be honest. I really didn't. So now I go back and I start to think, where did this turn? Where did this come all of a sudden with being, dealing with a traffic stop and, like we do these days? If we go back and we look at, Philando in 2016, since 2016, it seems like it's gotten worse. So it's like we haven't even stepped up to the plate. So, it's just, it's sad, but it's something that both me and my wife will continue to try and make changes, to try and make a difference, not to blame one side or this side. If we don't continue to bridge the gap and come together and understand each other, understand that that officer wants to go home just like I want to go home. And when we can start to learn that and understand that, I think we can start to bridge the gap with certain things and deal with things differently than we are right now.
Right. Thank you, Wayne. So Nate, I wanted to come back to you. Obviously, people have had a lot to say about that scene, and it seems as if that scene is sort of the fulcrum where the movie begins to turn, where you get the basis for what the conflict is going to end up being about. How many drafts? What went into it? How and when did you know that you got the scene the way you wanted it to be? Oh, you're muted.
You're muted, Nate.
If I may, I'd like to speak to the elephant in the room, and that is, none of us have really been able to put our thumb on this talk thing, right? And that is the paradox. We have some of the most educated people in America on this call, and we will have this call and we will end this call. And wherever our children are, boys, girls specifically, boys in this context, wherever they are, in the cars that they're in, the friends they're with, the colleges they're at, we have to acknowledge that they are less safe than any of the people that are of other races that are around them. No matter what comes out of this call, we have to acknowledge that. That's the paradox of being Black and free in America. And that is not the result of anything that we have done. It's the result of what has been done to us. And I think that we have to acknowledge that. We can't solve this issue without dealing with white supremacy. We can't change the narrative if we don't acknowledge the narrative. We're the only people that have to figure out why other people hurt us, figure out what they're thinking about when they hurt us, but don't have a say in changing how they think about us. Then we must hand that down to our children for them to not only survive, but for their children's children to exist. And then they have to have that conversation with them for them to survive. This is the paradox. So when we talk about patriotism, we talk about the republic that is the United States of America, we talk about democracy, we can't even mention those things without talking about the racial trauma that put us in this situation. Anyone that doesn't want to talk about slavery, I mean, this is what Brian Stevenson talks about, right? We want to talk about where we are, but we want to talk about how we got here. That for decades and decades, people were lynched for no reason at all. I'd imagine that there were parents that gave their kids the talk when going to the I'd imagine that Miss Mammy Till gave her kid the talk before he went down south. And I'd imagine that he did everything right. And we know because the lady has admitted that she's lied. But the lynchings, there was no protocol around, if you comply, you won't get skinned or turned into grease or your head chopped from your shoulders or hung up on a tree. This is the legacy that's being passed down. We can't separate ourselves from that and then say there's some good officers and there's some bad officers. We're living the legacy of racial terror. And we haven't stepped out of it. So yes, we can change some policy, but how do we change thinking when that thinking is steeped in white supremacy? A word that so many people are afraid to even say. Black folks a lot, I know, are afraid to, don't say that. Why? Am I right? You know, I interviewed so many police officers, and I'd love for some of the police officers to talk about this at some point, right? One of the police officers told me, he said, you know, Nate, when you're in a nice neighborhood like this one, we do what's called administrative policing. How are you, sir? How are you, ma'am? Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. Have a nice day. When we're in places like the jungle, we do what's called criminal policing. You have any warrants? Get the fuck out of your car, get the fuck on the curb, right? They don't know where it comes from because it's not in a book. I said, what book is that in? It's not in a book. Then why do you do it? Well, they hate us. They just hate us. And I'd imagine very similar seeds of dissent have been planted in the minds of these people all the way back to the poor whites that were hired to be slave patrol and make sure no one left that plantation. The first police. They'll try and kill you first. All of these things are being handed down to us. And we take it and we look at it. We throw our hands up because it's so hard. And then we pass the trauma down to our children. And it's not right. And it's not fair. Right. So in writing this scene, so to speak, the movie, but really this scene, I wanted to lay bare the paradox of being a Black person, Black man, educated in America. Because you could see if they were still in the hood and he had to give this talk, people would be off the hook, right? Well, the crime, you know, Black on Black crime, they see the Black. But here's a man that served for this very country, took a janitor's job in the nice neighborhood so his kid could go there. And I'm sure that came with swallowing a lot of pride. And then did everything right. Hands to the side, yet smiled. My son is over here. I'm going to reach past my son. And everything went wrong. The whole point of the scene where he talked to his son and he kept the other kid on so he could be a father to that kid in that moment in the same, is so no one can be off the hook. It's too easy to make a film where there's a bad cop and he walks around the corner and he sees the guy and he, hey boy, that's easy. But to be honest, I'm not worried about that guy. I'm worried about the good cop that's afraid because of psychological programming. He's been programmed to do the thing that he's gonna do. And then he discharged his weapon and he's going home, he's thinking about, he don't even know why he did it. That's the one I'm thinking about. No one should be let off the hook. No one, which is why I gave perspective to the cop. A lot of people are like, man, you gave the cops a voice. I damn sure did. Because if we don't know how they think, then we definitely won't get out of the situation. Sometimes we have to know how the other person thinks to de-escalate them, to do their job for them. So I try to approach it from all the way around. In this conversation, yes, I brought up the Supreme Court, which is fact. We do have the right to stand our ground if our body is in danger from anyone. That's a constitution. That's a right that was given to us through the Supreme Court as citizens. But yes, it doesn't apply to us. So what happens when you see this film? You acknowledge that the film goes off and you turn to your kid. Your kid's going to look at you and say, "So what was he talking about?" So my hope, and this is something Brian talks about a lot. We can't just give our kids an education. We have to give our kids a culturally responsive education. We have to, yes, tell them their rights, but then explain to them white supremacy, how we got here, how standing up for your rights could go wrong, but all the things are on the table. We can't just hope they get home. That's not proper, if I may say, as a father of 5 + 1, that's not proper parenting. To say it's okay if my kid goes home, but I don't fix the system that takes away Miss Castile's son. And I hope I answered the question about the but I just wanted to touch on that. It's blaring. We'll run around in circles if all we're talking about is laws for this century, policing for this century, all of these things that are just the branch and not the tree, not the root.
Thanks, Nate. Captain Lewis, Sean, Dr. Heatley and Stephanie, you've been very, very patient. We're trying to work my way through a kind of a consistent theme. I want to go to Captain Lewis and Stephanie in light of kind of some of the nuanced changes we've gone through in the last few responses. Specifically, Captain Lewis and Stephanie, being Black and being a part of the judicial system, okay? Legislative and also in terms of enforcement, listening to what Nate has said, listening to Valerie's experience, listening to what everybody has talked about. Is there a conflict in your minds? Is there a conflict at work when it comes to, or is there any kind of anxiety about balancing fairness for your people and then being responsible to your civic duty? And that's not to suggest that there's going to be any favoritism or lack of integrity in your work, but really, are you aware of the perceptions or the gaze of people outside of your community to make sure, quote unquote, that Lewis is not giving his brother a break, or Commonwealth's Attorney Morales does not feel sorry for this, this young man in the hood? How do you all balance and navigate that in your careers?
I'll start with this one. First, the movie was definitely riveting. And the toughest part, why I said it was tough to watch, was during the traffic stop. And in my current position with the police department, I'm pretty much the one that will review things like that. I'm over our patrol division. So just to see those officers' tactics and to see that they were doing everything they could in the car to comply with the officers, that was powerful to me, not just because of, it being a police officer, but I don't have that uniform on now. I take that uniform off when I get to work, and I'm a Black person. I have a 17-year-old son who's tall as I am, and that's what I envision in that car. And so, the toughest part of that for me to watch is I was able to put myself in the father's seat. I could see myself telling my son those same exact words. So that was the toughest part of the movie to watch, because there are, and here in Northern Virginia, it's a suburb of DC, so it is a lot of nice neighborhoods here. So that movie just rung a bell with me because we live in that type of area here. As far as at work, one of the things that when I was growing up, I was involved in traffic stops where I felt belittled. And I can still remember those traffic stops. And the biggest thing I did, I think I heard someone say is, like, you know what, I just bit my tongue, sit there and said, yes, sir. You want to get smart with them, but you're like, you know what, I'll just let this one go. That was one of the passions that I took when I became a police officer. Not only did I want to become a police officer, but I wanted to become a person that's a change agent, or someone that can now make decisions when I see something wrong. And, as far as my patrol. So if I see something now, I'm able to make those changes. I'm able to work with people like Jackie, Bishop Taylor of Taylor Ministries, the community, and make these changes and make these connections. Quite frankly, when I got this position in public safety, my train of thought is that I used to watch a lot of movies as a kid with our people getting sprayed down the street with fire hoses, and police officers, hitting people with batons. The first half of my career, I was actually a firefighter for 14 years. So I was able to do that part. And that gave me a sense of pride because I was able to make some culture changes there to erase out of my mind that fire hose mentality that I saw there. Next thing I want to do is become a police officer to make those changes where on my watch, those things will not happen. And I really believe that with these panel discussions, we're going to be able to affect change, not only in the police departments, but in our community and the criminal justice system. My thing is when I'm at work is I treat everyone equally, but I do mentor the young Black men and women that I come across because I know what they're going through. I know what their parents are going through. So I take the time and I will give them extra time. If someone says anything about that, then that's on them. But my goal is to, like my late grandmother says, was to do my part. And my part is to if I can make the culture go a positive direction, 1 or 2 steps, then that's what I want to do. To try to dive into the question a little bit more, I do not see that in our department. Obviously, a lot of times when people are around, they probably won't say those things to me where I would see those things happening. But I do know that there is a culture issue in police. And one of the things that's one of the top things I try to focus on is try to recruit more Black men and women in our department, because I don't care about change. I want a transformation. The only way you're going to transform something is inside. It's like that caterpillar that's in a cocoon. If we can get inside that cocoon, once that caterpillar changes into the butterfly, then we all can look at it and say, we are all proud of it. But the only way we're going to make that transformation in criminal justice and police is to have more of our Black men and women see this as a profession where they can come in and make that change. I know someone brought up the word implicit bias, which is an awesome word because Mr. Parker, you brought up a lot of people, whether you know it or not, you were raised in a certain way. If you look at a certain news or you look at you read a certain internet piece, if you keep yourself in that box and you're raised in that small box, then that's how you're going to think. You may not even know what you're going to think, but you're sort of taught in some cases to fear, Black men. So one of the things that we have to do is if we have a more inclusive police department, we can then let the people, the culture that's there now, be around some of these Black men and women and other minorities and talk to them and learn that, this person is just like I am. So that was a very powerful movie. And I am so glad that you wrote that movie and sent it out there.
All right. Thank you, Captain Lewis. Stephanie, if you remember the question, just wanted to recap. What is it like having to balance doing your job effectively and making sure that any type of just basic kindness or thoughtfulness is not perceived as you giving your people a break? How do you manage that?
Well, one, let me state very clearly that before I am the elected Commonwealth's attorney or an agent of the criminal legal system, I'm a Black woman, period. I'm a Black woman. I'm a mother of 4 Black children. I'm a wife to a Black and Puerto Rican husband, and I don't leave that at the door. The members of my community who elected me, they know that I am someone who is here for transformative change. I am someone who is here, standing against systemic racism and standing for restorative justice. And one of the things that was not in my bio is that, 6 years ago, February 10th, in fact, in 2015 was when I was first elected. And within about 2 months of being elected, we had an officer involved shooting where a young man, 18 years old, William Chapman II, was killed by a police officer in my city. and I indicted that police officer, and I tried that case, you know, and when I say I tried it, I don't mean someone in my office tried it. I mean, I prosecuted that case personally over the course of a year, doing all the motions, the week-long jury trial, and ended up with a voluntary manslaughter conviction. And so I am someone who is committed to doing what is right. If you feel like I'm showing favoritism, maybe you should learn what the word equity means, because for too long we have focused on treating everyone the same. But when we've had discussions here on this conversation about the history, the 400 years of what was done to Black people, and the lack and the failure to seek reconciliation by our government and those in power, we have a responsibility to act equitably. And for me, that means that I am going to call out the fact that my profession has done grave harm to communities of color for as long as my profession has existed, that our criminal legal system has a major footprint on our communities in a way that keeps us from being able to thrive in the way that other, you know, people have in this country. And I am going to do everything in my power. That's why I have those programs. I have sustainable programs aimed at helping our people, engaging with our community. And I talk very frequently about the things that we face as Black people, how food insecurity, housing insecurity, failure to have adequate resources for education, for medical care, failure for us to have opportunities to build intergenerational wealth and the legacy that we have in this country of violence, and then want to turn around and talk about Black people being violent. All of these things I am willing to talk about, delve into, and fight for transformative change on, because I'm a Black woman and I bring that to the job. I refuse to let this profession change me. I will shape it. And so I don't ever back away from the fact that I'm a Black woman first. And I'm very proud of the work that I'm doing to transform this system into something that looks completely and entirely different, because it is acting and it is functioning exactly the way it was designed to function. And that is, you know, something that is simply unacceptable, harmful, and has to be changed. So, you know, this movie, this film was something that, you know, I will share. I don't usually watch films like this because of the interpersonal trauma that I feel because of the work that I have done. You know, that I have held my victim's mother. I have spent time with his cousin, Mr. Lewis, who has my phone number and can call me whenever he gets ready to this day. And, you know, I remember hearing my victim's voice. We didn't have body cam video, but I heard his voice on a taser cam. And I have interpersonal trauma that I cannot watch films like this, and I cannot watch videos like this to try to shield myself so that I can adequately perform my job function when I have to deal with issues like this at work. So this is actually the first time in a very long time where I have watched something like this. And, you know, it really, you know, it just was, the reason why I use the term familiar was because this is something that far too many families in our country have to experience. And Ms. Bao, I send all my love and support to you. And I've spent time with Ms. Bao, and I've spent time with many family sisters and mothers who have had to experience this. And I will say, you know, as my final thought, if, you know, you are not discomfort, you know, feeling discomfort, and if you are not uncomfortable as a prosecutor, as a public servant with any of this, whether you are Black, white, or anything else, if you are not uncomfortable, if you don't feel discomfort every day that you have to incarcerate someone, every day that you encounter a situation where police have violated somebody's rights, you are unfit for public service, period. And so regardless, we have to stop limiting these questions to Black people who act within the system. And we have to be asking everybody who is a system actor, are you uncomfortable with incarceration? Are you uncomfortable? Do you despise systemic racism? Are you here to root out race in the police department? And if we cannot have these conversations, we truly will not see transformative change.
Wow, that was great. Thank you, Ms. Morales. Sean, you've been really patient. Reverend Doctor, patience of the saints. I'm going to come to Sean, question for Nate, and then I'm coming straight to you, okay? So Sean, Jackie has invited you in specifically to talk about culture within policing. I know when I read your intro, you were a police officer for 5 years, and you were removed from service because of what was referred to as an invasive search.
Correct.
So I've got a two-pronged question for you. The first part of the question is, knowing what happened to you and your expulsion from the force based on what you testified was clearly the culture and what you were taught. There's a quote that I found in one of the stories about you where you said, veteran officers told you, forget everything you learned in the academy. That doesn't work here. So can you talk about two things? Can you talk about the culture? And then my question to you personally is, seeing all the things that have transpired just in the last 5 years, right? Knowing what you are no longer on the force for versus watching other officers get away with killing people with no repercussions. Is there a sense of resentment? Do you feel like you're sort of a sacrificial lamb? I know I rolled a lot into that question, but if you could tackle that.
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks to everyone for allowing me to join on this. I really appreciate it. Unfortunate situation. And I think that, well, I guess I'll start with your second question. I think that having seen what's taken place in the last 5 years, I wouldn't say I have much resentment or feeling of me being a scapegoat. I mean, certainly I have some opinions about how things were handled in my particular case. I think, and Jackie and I have talked about this quite a bit, I think what I'm feeling is a sense of disappointment that I'm not able to do more to change not only the culture, but the training that a lot of our officers were receiving. And, you know, I'm speaking specifically towards the Washington Metropolitan Police Department, which is one of the larger police departments in the country. And, you know, as I'm sure everyone on this panel knows, training is different to a certain degree, department to department. But for the most part, it's a very militaristic training. It's very intense. It's very combative. It's very us against them. And, you know, Nate's not wrong when he says, you know, this is a generational thing that, you know, has been passed on for as long as we can really remember, from officer to officer. And, you know, I personally saw it in the academy and as well as when I got out on the street. You know, it's kind of like, you know, we're going to war and you better be ready. And, you know, what happened with me happened. You know, we can get into that a little bit more, but, you know, I saw a lot of stuff out on the street with officers that, you know, you're kind of like, why are you so aggressive right now? Why are you, you know, I was in the narcotics unit my last 2 years, and I was probably involved in over, I don't know, 1,000 traffic stops. And I'd never approached a situation with such an intensity as we saw in the film. And as we've seen, you know, a lot of these officers approach situations in some of these shootings. And, you know, I think that's where I'm kind of disappointed that I can't do more, because there's such a better way to handle these situations. And I understand the officer's perspective. Look, I think last year, 242 officers got killed. And of that, over 100 of them were, you know, shootings. So I understand, look, there's an inherent danger being a police officer, but at the same time, like, there's no need to start a situation at such an escalated level, and not being able to convey that and help officers understand that, I think is more the sentiment that I'm feeling these days, more so than anything remotely having to do with my case. I mean, to be quite honest, I just feel, and I've told Jackie this before, I just feel like I'm helpless, and I just wish I could do more. I kind of rambled there. So if I didn't fully answer your question, please kind of redirect me and refocus me so I can. But I hope that helped.
That was fine. So we need to wrap it up. I know Jackie told you guys an hour. I've got to get a question to Reverend Dr. Q. Before I do that, I want to set it up. Nate, I just need a quick yes or no answer from you on the first question. And then I want to touch on another interview and then go straight to Dr. Heatley. So Nate, the yes or no part of the question was there ever a draft that included Lincoln living at the end?
No, I knew you were going to ask that. Absolutely wasn't. And for the law enforcement people on the call, everything I've done is backed up by research, you know. So I talked to a lot of law enforcement, but I also talked to a lot of SWAT members. And I kind of talked through scenarios. And the only way someone would get killed coming out of a situation like that is if they lost contact. And if you remember, he slammed the phone and broke it, and it never rang again. So while time was passing outside, they're trying to figure out, well, we have no contact inside. And if we have no contact, we have to assume the worst. And if we're assuming the worst and our guys are in there, sometimes people get the green light. You know, it's like, well, we don't know what's happening. They're not answering the phone. If you get a shot, take it. So it was, you know, really what Sean was talking about. When every single cop asked to speak under the condition of anonymity. So I'm so happy that Sean, that you have the courage to just be honest about what's happening, because so many people don't have the courage. I mean, people I knew, they told me everything that you saw in this film, none of this was fantasy. Everything was backed up by a scenario or a conversation I had with someone in law enforcement about what would happen, what wouldn't, the type of aggressiveness, the way you approach someone that you think may really be a suspect. Like you said, the hyper militarized approach, the camaraderie, we're going to war. You literally see the energy change when they started talking about certain things. You know, it's like, they hate us. They hate me. They want to kill us, man. You know what? And you're just like, do you realize that you just went to 8 and we're just at a restaurant talking? And then the you don't understand. You just don't get it. You don't understand. You don't. And then, you know, I'm going to digress for a second. One officer was talking to me. I was supposed to do a ride along with him, and I didn't get, you know, for whatever reason that didn't work out. And he texted me a video, and it was a video of a shooting, and it was grainy. I was like, "What is this?" And he called. He's like, "You get the video?" I'm like, "No." He's like, "Bro, you missed it. There was a shooting. Like, you were supposed to be with us. I mean, this happened. This time we were waiting." And there was a genuine excitement, not for someone to die, but almost like it was Cowboys and Indians. It was like a perverted game that was somewhere just intertwined in his professional job. And it was very real. He didn't really know me from Adam, but he couldn't wait to tell me how it got jacked up that day. You know, so I would never, you know, for me, I'm not the guy that's going to give you the bow on the ending ever. I'm not going to give you false hope or fantasy. You know, it's not a black exploitation film. They're not going to come out and, you know, it's not Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. You know, that conversation happened inside that precinct, but it's a metaphor, because until that conversation that happens inside spills out into the streets will be the streets. No matter how much progress they got. We were distracted by the fact that guys said, "I'm thinking things different." Well, the people outside are not. And the media spin was a part of that as well. So often we have these great conversations, and thank God for technology and the Zoom, you know, recording and all of this, because people can see us on this call really talking through how we might move this conversation forward in a meaningful way, how we might make tangible changes to the narrative. We have police officers on this Zoom right now, and they're not hiding behind some false sense of professionalism. They're being honest about what they see, how they feel, and how they can be of service. I love what you said, Sister Stephanie, where you're like, if you don't hate, you know, a systemic racism, then what are you doing? You can't play the line. You can't say, well, you know, I'm over here. That's not, it does apply to you. So to answer your question, every frame, and I would suggest anyone that's seen it once, see it twice. Anyone who's seen it twice, see it 3 times. Anyone who's seen it 3 times, refer it to a white person. because every single frame of this movie is intentional. And I promise you, I put so much time and energy and research into it. Every watch, you will find something different. I promise you that. Every watch, you will find something different. For cops, for victims, you'll see something that makes you say, I never thought of that. Or that is true. Or I've heard someone say that. Or I feel that way. Or I've seen that person grieve that way. Or I have a cousin that responded that way when they sent the black guy to my door. It is chock full to the point where it's busting at the seams with truth. So no one's off the hook. Everyone can identify and everyone can join the fight.
Okay. Dr. Heatley, more of a hypothetical question for you, but
Sure.
will require a very insightful answer. As a faith leader, if Lincoln was your parishioner and this happened, how would you have counseled him? That's the first part. And then secondly, you know, this notion, being a person of faith, we are constantly taught and encouraged to trust God, leave things in God's hands. But then also, you know, how do you counsel someone who's tired of waiting, who has decided to say, you know what, this is my indignation and my anger is righteous. I'm not waiting for someone else. How would you counsel Link if he was your parishioner? That's part one. And then the other part of it is, as a person of faith, you also have the story of Nehemiah when he went to build that wall. And Nehemiah wasn't a pacifist at all. So how do you strike the balance as a person of faith and then also as a faith leader in a circumstance like this?
The first thing I'll say is, and I'm going to kind of go in a different direction. I would say that I don't know if you strike a balance, but you have to prioritize appropriately. And I say that to understand that at the root of white supremacy is Christianity, in particular white Christianity, because these were white Christians who put into the laws, if you read Jamar Tisby's Code of Compromise, understanding that the General Assembly of the Commonwealth of Virginia in the 1600s actually made it a law for African enslaved individuals to not become fully proselytized, saying that they could be slaves, but they cannot be fully proselytized, meaning we can baptize you into the faith, but you cannot become a member of the church, because once they became a member of the church, they had to be seen as equal. And according to the Anglican Church, it was cultural to say that you could not enslave your brothers and sisters. So you bring them into a system that is not full of truth, that is built on a lie that says you're not equal. So I would start there, because then that perpetuates all of this, because these were Christians who were doing this, who were living the lie, believing that they were bringing a faith to an African people who already knew God. And when you really do the history behind this, Christianity is much more African than it is European, because the Western European thought that we philosophize and theologize with is African thought that came from African men in the first 400 years of Christianity, who has developed this whole thing notion we know as systematic theology. That is Black, Northern African people. That's the first thing. So Christianity is African, and the oldest African churches are those of the Coptic Church. You don't believe me? The Ethiopian eunuch in Acts 8 was proselytized before Saul even became Paul. So that means before the gospel got to Europe, it was already in Africa. You had two African men that was represented at the at Pentecost. And remember, two African men actually baptized Paul. Okay, so we got to start there. Now, as far as counseling a parishioner, I would just listen. I wouldn't try to fix. I would not try to give reason or rationale, or even try to make light of the situation. I would just be present, because the power of presence and allowing their emotions and what they're feeling to run its course is powerful, and it's also therapeutic. And then I would also understand, and I'm glad the terminology that we're using here, because there really are some mental health themes and a lot of things that we use in therapy, because it really is traumatic with all of these experiences of just being an African-American, you know, in this country. I would still try my best to direct with wisdom, but I would honestly say I don't know what is the right response. And I'm saying this hypothetically, and the truth is I don't know what I would do until that situation is presented. And so I would let it rest there. I think that what I can do as a pastor, and this is why I say prioritize, is to understand the voice and also the arenas that God, I believe, has gifted me with. And I really think that what sums all of this up is there needs to be within Christianity an admittance from our white brothers and sisters in America, some cultural and intellectual humility. What do I mean by that? Everybody theologizes from their own cultural context. There is no one norm in Christianity except that Jesus Christ is Lord. Once you get beyond that, every culture has a different expression of Christianity. There may be a dominant culture, but that normally stems from who is controlling the narrative and who has the resources. And that's what we see in America. That is now part of, again, an unjust system by who's controlling the resources, so they control the narrative to say where you are and where you belong. But when you look at Christianity from a worldview, North America, South America, Europe, Africa, South Korea, Australia, all have different manifestation expressions of Christ through their cultural lens. So what are we saying by that? We're saying the same thing when we talk about equality. The white Jesus that's presented is done from a cultural context. But the Jesus that is presented is not the full picture of the Jesus that we know. Because African Americans present Jesus from a cultural context. We all theologize from our person. I theologize as a Black man in America. You have people who theologize as Black women in America, white women in America, white men in America. So all of these social constructs are now a part and sort of are intertwined in how we're trying to see God. But if you can't actually exhibit any humility in your understanding, then we're going to perpetuate these same notions and have these implicit biases and these microaggressions. Because at the center of all this is a divided faith, because Black people and white people normally don't worship together. So how can we really talk about unity and equality? We can't even come to the same God that we believe is one together. Now, I'm proud to say that as an African-American pastor, I do pastor white people. And Jackie and Wayne know this. I say I'm as Black as I can in the pulpit, and it blows my mind that I got white people come to join the church because we're doing all the cultural things that we would normally do. But when I speak to them, what they say is, I see the essence of Jesus Christ. So the essence of Jesus Christ, now for them, it does not matter what the shape or the presentation is. It comes with a feeling where they feel like they're at home. But what they're tuning into is really the therapy session of which the Black church was created, because our white brothers and sisters said, we didn't want you. So now you have to create this. And the danger of it all is that's the one institution that for the most part they left alone and say you can have. But I believe that it's brought us closer to God. I hope that answers the question, and I'm just going to end it there.
Thank you very much for that, Reverend. So I want to allow Jackie and Valerie to wrap it up. I know we talked about getting to a point of solutions, and there has been some work that has been done. Prior to this call, prior to this 2021, Jackie and Valerie have combined. They've worked on a toolkit. They've instituted the KISS program. There's a number of things going on, so I'd like to give them the last word to talk about what they're doing to sort of help mitigate these problems that we've been discussing for the last hour or so. Jackie, Valerie, you have the floor.
I'll go to Valerie's because I want to give you the final word. I just want to say a few things. I met Sean in grand jury in DC. I was a grand jury court reporter in DC and Virginia. So we were in the courtroom, in the grand jury room quite often. And I am very proud of Sean. Sean really wants to do some major work, and I'm asking this panel to please use him. We have a man who was a former MPD police officer who wants to speak out. And when you have these discussions, please keep Sean in mind, because he wants to help make changes on the inside. And he would be an integral person a part of that training. So I just wanted to say that. I created Not Reaching, and Brian, I sent a package to you. I hope you got it. Great. The reason why I created that was because of Philando. And I tell this story quite often that on July 6th of 2016, we lived in Coatesville, Pennsylvania. And as we were home celebrating our son Justin's 30th birthday, he had just come back from Afghanistan. He was a medic. We're excited about his birthday. But over in Falcon Heights, Minnesota, Valerie's losing her son to a routine traffic stop. And that day, my life changed forever. And we knew that we had to create a solution, not the solution, but we needed to figure a way to keep drivers safe and get them home. And that's why we created the Not Reaching pouch that clips to your air vent, holds all your documents, so that when an officer approaches the vehicle, he's not seeing all that movement and the reaching. And that was why we created it. And that's a solution. But also we created the Alliance for Safe Traffic Stops so that we can train and educate and bring awareness to building the bridge of keeping motorists and officers both safe. We have had the fortune of working with Captain Lewis. Valerie is amazing on what we're doing. We also, and it was so timely watching the movie, the KISS campaign, keeping it safe for students. And it's teaching teen drivers the proper procedures of traffic stops. My husband says this all the time. We were taught how to drive, but they didn't teach us how to handle a traffic stop. That's so true. So what we're doing is partnering with an organization called 360 Immersive. They are creating traffic stop simulations. We are going to do virtual reality traffic stops with headsets and everything. So that will put the teen driver in a traffic stop before they're actually on the road. So we're looking forward to doing all of those things and continuing to create some solutions. And I'm just very excited that we're working with all these people. Attorney Morales and Valerie worked on the toolkit. I'm not going to take credit for that at all. I'm just an advocate. So I just want to pass that on to Valerie Castile.
Oh, I wasn't on mute. Girl, my grandbaby's here. Thank you guys again for allowing me to have a voice on this platform. And thank you, Nate, for the your great movie. It's sentimental for me because of that whole situation and what I was thinking about, but I didn't do it. But that thought did cross my mind. Trust and believe me, it did. But the things that I have been working on since then, I developed the Philando Castile Relief Foundation. We help families that lose a loved one to gun violence, not necessarily police brutality, but gun violence as well. We help our struggling school systems with the negative lunch balances, and we won a lot of different awards from the NEA, the ACLU, countless places. And July the 6th, on that commemoration day, 2020, I had been working with the Commissioner of Public Safety here in Minnesota, and we announced the updated driver's manual. They decided, with my help, to implement a little part in there about traffic stop. When you have a weapon in the car, what's expected of you and what's expected from the officer as well. So I was really pleased that they did that, because it took them so long to do it. I mean, Minnesota is the state where 4 of the most egregious murders by police has happened. Right here in progressive Minnesota. The 4 top high-profile murders right here in Minnesota. I was instrumental in the driver's manual. I work with Stephanie Morales on the toolkit, which is a collaboration of 50 diverse people coming together with ideas and strategies and recommendations to facilitate to police the BCA, the community, to try to bridge that gap and understand one another. Right now, as we speak, the Philando Castile Omnibus Bill has been walked to the floor. The bill is H as in Harry, F as in Frank, 784. This is an approach, recommendations to reverse or retaliate. Oh my goodness. Anyway, retaliate.
That's okay.
Oh my God. I just can't even believe it right now. I have been working on this for the last 4 years to come up with some kind of way that legislators will look at all the things that happens in the Black community. The Black community here has not been able to thrive for over 30 years. And I was looking, you know, after my son was murdered, I started looking at everything through a different lens. And I was looking around and I was seeing how things in the Black community were just deteriorating. You know, we weren't moving forward anymore. We didn't have a gas station, a grocery store, clothing stores, laundromats. None of these things are owned by Black people, but we spend our money. All our income goes to other places, other cultures, but we as Black people, we're not moving forward. So I worked at this and I got involved with some other people to come up with this bill. And I promise you, it's artistry. It's artistry. I mean, if they implement these bills, it will eradicate, that's my word, eradicate the systemic racism and rape. I'm just so overwhelmed. I was just on a meeting before I got on this interview. I was just on a meeting and I was talking about how I had been reaching out to different representatives and senators and setting up times to speak with them about this bill and for them to sign on it. You know, I need to know why not. If you don't want to support this bill, you need to tell me why not. You understand what I'm saying? So I just been kind of hyped up because I was just on that other meeting, but I just been doing a lot. And sometimes it can be overwhelming because I'm a mother 100%. Yeah. And what happened to my son wasn't right. And there was no accountability. Nobody was held responsible for murdering my son, for being honest and telling the truth. You know, where do we go from there? Your honesty and you telling the truth will get you killed. Are you serious? Where do we go from that? I am so dead ass right now.
It's okay, Valerie. It's all right. I want to thank you all for being so gracious with your time. I know Nate wants to get one last word, and I see you, Nate. But again, I want to thank Jackie Carter for bringing this together, Dr. Quincy Wheatley, Wayne, Dr. Captain Lewis, Ms. Morales, Onyx, Brian, Sean, and of course, Valerie, good to see you again after all this time. Congratulations on the bill. I'll be keeping that bill in my prayers. Fingers crossed, toes crossed, whatever I got to do to send whatever energy I can in that direction. Nate, You have been the man of the hour. We'll let you finish with the last word. What did you have to add to us?
No, I just wanted to say, Miss Valerie, you are the reason for the season. So you have my support in ways that only Brian could tell you what it means. I bring an army and the angels. You know, my mother, the prayer warriors, everybody. So I want you to know, and I sent you my information. You know, the way you can get in touch with me. Brian and I are in the streets. We're doing this work. And as we're building a curriculum and discussion points. We've already screened for the Center for Policing Equity with Brother Philip Atiba. And we've sat with law enforcement as they watch this film, not knowing how they're going to react. And the reactions have been overwhelmingly positive with respect to them admitting that there are problems in the training that can be addressed, that need to be addressed. And these trainers saying, we're going to use pieces of this film. So I want you to know, as you go and you put this bill out, you're not alone. I know celebrities. I know, and everybody knows what time it is when I call them. You know, we're not coming to play games because I'm not afraid of anyone. And anyone that knows me and knows my work, they know that. So you have me, text me, email me when it's time to do something. If you need me to tweet something out, if you need me to get a celebrity on board, whatever it takes, we're in this together. You're not fighting this alone. So I wanted to tell you that publicly, so you know, and then tell everyone else as you go off. You know, we created some solutions, yes, and some talking points, yes, but it's on us to take that and spread those things amongst our colleagues and our friends. You know, as Sister Stephanie says, we can't be afraid of creating solutions, even if they make us unpopular, even if they make us targets. We have to do this. This is the work for our children and our children's children. So with that, I'm done. But please, Miss Valerie, please, you need me. Reach out and let's start this walk together in any way that I can be supportive.
Thank you for that, Nate. Thank you all again. I'm going to give Jackie the last word, but before I do that, here is an example of the not reaching pouch. I've got one in my car. Right. Brian's got his. Okay. So, Nate,
hopefully you'll get yours as well. But I just want to
I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what it was, Miss Carter. I saw it and I showed my wife. It wasn't the one because I hadn't seen the video yet. And I was confused. And then I saw the video. It all made sense.
You got the wallet too, right?
I got it all. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I just want to thank everyone. Valerie always tears me up. She's not just a partner in this endeavor, but she's a sister. And I love her. I didn't know Philando, but I know Philando. I get to hear stories about him that most people don't get to hear. And she's been to our home, our little home here in Virginia, and we just love her. And I just asked, you know, just like Mr. Parker said, he's there. Hey, let's do this. This is 2021. Yeah, I'm 57. I want to make some inroads. I want to make some, change. And I'm here. Everyone on this call, I believe, feels the same way. I am so proud of all of us for coming together, even tonight. But let's not make this the last time. And that's all I'm going to say. I am going to say that this is being recorded. We're going to edit and do some B-roll footage. So on Monday, it's going to be a beautiful product that I'll send out to everyone. Stephanie, real quick, can you just give a little bit of detail on the toolkit because they didn't really hear it?
Yeah.
Absolutely. So the toolkit was a very special project that we worked on through the Institute for Innovation and Prosecution in New York. And this, I say it was special because it was made up with prosecutors, law enforcement, and most importantly, Ms. Val and mothers and sisters who had been impacted by police violence, taking away their loved ones. And this is one of the very few opportunities where I saw the voices of those who had been permanently impacted being uplifted to have a say in the policies that would be introduced to be implemented in offices around the country. And so in short, what that toolkit is about one, preventing these instances of police violence and police terror. Two, it's about transparency and giving a protocol and a strategy about how to act when we have these unfortunate, and traumatic incidents that tear up lives, families, and communities, to make sure that the public and the families can get transparent information. And finally, there's a blueprint for accountability where myself somebody who has gotten a conviction. I told, you know, all of the details about the different things that I did in order to see justice for my family in Portsmouth, Virginia. And then all the other prosecutors who had their different experiences, they shared their strategies that we could put in place to share with officers around the country so that they can hold police accountable in instances of violation of people's rights and when lives are lost. And so in short, it is supposed to be a comprehensive and holistic model that we can introduce to prosecutors' offices so that they can hold themselves accountable to be accountable to their communities. So that we are not just saying, you know, all right, let's go to the legislature and talk about how to change the laws and not dealing in the reality that if you do desire as a prosecutor to prosecute and hold police accountable, you know, prosecute and do the thing we know how to do with everybody else and Black people all the time. You know, we know how to do that when it comes to holding law enforcement accountable when we lose life. So a very important project. I can't stress enough. The most important thing about it is that it uplifts the voice of Ms. Val and all the mothers and sisters and people who have lost their loved ones to police violence.
And I will send everyone a copy. I have it in a PDF form, and I'll send it out to all of you so you can see this great piece of work. Again, thank you for your time. I know we ran over. I greatly appreciate it. I want you all to have a wonderful weekend. And again, thank you.
Very much.
Thank you for having us.
All right, bye.
Thank you.
God bless you.